All right, welcome to Equal Time Soccer. We are here for a very special pregame show episode of Equal Time Soccer featuring Nebraska Talk Soccer or Nebraska Soccer Talk. Apparently, I'm changing up this graphic forever because we are live.
Yeah.
So here alongside Joe Cleary. Joe, you, I believe, started and run Nebraska Soccer Talk, and now you have a fun secret nickname that we gave you on this graphic.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me again. Hopefully my jinx doesn't carry over to Minnesota Omaha like Minnesota Nebraska last spring. So
yeah, for those who don't know, Joe and I get ambitious and try to do our own pregame show about the Huskers versus Gophers in the Big Ten tournament. And then while we were doing this show, news essentially broke that the Huskers had to drop because there was a COVID outbreak. This was during a global pandemic, so not shocking, but
yeah.
We think we maybe played a part in jinxing it. Let's hope we didn't do that this time. So for a quick snapshot of the matchup tonight, Minnesota is 3-0-2 with a 4-0 win over Wyoming as their most recent result. And probably the 1-0 win over Baylor is their strongest result on paper. Baylor has gone on to tie Wisconsin. So, at the very least, there's some good shared opponent quality there. Omaha is 3-2. They lost to Wyoming 4-0, but that was, I believe, on the road, like you mentioned before we started. And Omaha has also beat Nebraska this stretch, which is a huge win for them and a fun rivalry win for them. And so, Joe, when Omaha is playing well, what does that look like?
I think when Omaha is playing well, it starts and ends with their defensive organization. I mean, they are a very sound defensive team. As a team, it's not just their back line and their goalkeeper, which are very good. Mia Olsen's a sophomore. She's from Europe and she's brilliant in goal. She earned a lot of awards last year. Margaret Levine's the center back, leads a really outstanding back line, but it's a team defense, organized, and they give a ton of effort. And then their attack, they need to be able to get the ball to Sophia Green in the box. So that's when Omaha is at their best, is when they're organized, working hard, and defending as a team.
They've only put up 2 goals this year, but that really shows that, as you said, it's a defensive strength for them.
Yeah, that they're still coming along. They're a younger team, so I think the goal scoring and that stuff is going to continue to come along this year and into next year. It's definitely not one of their strengths, but they do have some players who can score goals. It's just getting the ball to them. Right. When the Gophers are rolling, because they're have unbeaten yet this year. What does that look like? What are their strengths, or what do they need to do to be successful?
I think in some ways it's similar in the sense that I do think they start with a strong defense, because prior to that Wyoming game, they'd only scored 2 games the whole non-conference slate too. And so they were relying on shutouts literally this entire year to get ties or wins, because they'd only scored 2 goals in 4 games before that 4-goal outburst against Wyoming. So where they've looked good is in most matches, they've limited the number of chances that Megan Plashko has had to save back in goal. And then when they had mistakes against Mississippi State, for instance, Megan Plashko played out of her mind and had like 5 game-saving saves to keep the 0-0 tie. So I think when they're at their best, they're limiting the chances teams get so that it's a low percentage chance. And then when they've looked good in the attack, they've really been able to get the outside backs forward. So whether it's one of them at a time on the strong side, or they've brought Sophia Bowman, who had a really great breakout freshman year last year, played every minute of her freshman spring. She'll sort of get into that final third and give the forwards someone to combine with out on the wings. And then there's sort of this stretching of the defense where then the Gophers have more space in the box. So usually it's either been, keep a stout defense, and then the attack is either a direct ball or a free kick, but honestly, they haven't converted a ton of those. It's been when they get the outside back or Sophia Bowman out to combine in the attack. And I think, I'm super curious. Matchups like these where it's, theoretically a mismatch on paper between a mid-major and a Big Ten opponent. I think it's interesting to think about, what is Omaha thinking going into this game in terms of how they're going to prepare for Minnesota? Like, what does Omaha need to be concerned about coming in facing the Gophers?
I mean, Omaha, at the end of the day, if Omaha can replicate what they did against Nebraska, which is really difficult because they played an outstanding team effort game. They gave up more shots, obviously, but they stopped everything that needed to be stopped. Omaha cannot against Minnesota or any other team. They can't get into like a run and gun back and forth type of game, especially with a team that's a Power 5 team that's probably going to be a little bit more athletic and maybe a little deeper. But just in general, like they haven't shown that they're going to score a bunch of goals. So if they're giving up an early goal or giving up a cheap goal, that's going to put them behind. You know, in their exhibition, which that's when I got to see most of them in their exhibitions before my schedule got busy. And I think they've gotten better at it. Is their defense needs to make sure that they don't give the ball away cheaply in their defending half or their defending third, and not conceding on set pieces, which they're going to be. Omaha can be good on set pieces. They haven't quite clicked there yet, but I think that's potential. And then to score a goal, they need to find the way to work the ball forward and then give the ball to Sophia Green, get the ball to Sophia Green in the box, because Sophia is not going to be the type of player who's going to beat 3 defenders from midfield or the top of the attacking third. But if you get the ball to her feet and she can, if Minnesota gives her an inch, she'll get a turn, get a slight touch past, and she's going to cause problems if it's in and around the box.
And there have been times where the Minnesota backline, when they faced a lot of runners or they faced a lot of like multiple attackers, like against Mississippi State, there were times where if attackers were really making the Gopher defense sort of think and communicate and work, there's 3 brand new starters on the Gopher backline. 3 of them are also converted players. They're not defenders. And so there actually was, I think, somewhat of a test against Mississippi State that showed a bit of an opening for opposing teams, which is if an attacker can sort of stretch them and run across them and make them communicate and keep track. So is that something that like Sophia Green or another can do?
Yep. And then it all depends. I'm not sure where they're going to be playing everyone, because they haven't completely settled on some players' positions, and some players play multiple positions during that. But Andrea Daves is a senior. She's excellent. She's tricky. Emily Erland can do some things as well. And then they have some wingers that can play and be tricky. It's just the fact that you have to get the ball up there and keep it up there, and not turn it over. But what do you think Minnesota needs to do to come away with an away game? Because this is a big deal for Omaha to have a Power 5 opponent come in to Caniglia Field in Omaha. You don't get Omaha, mid-majors don't often get that all the time.
Yeah. I think it's going to be big. Like you said, Nebraska's going to try and be stout defensively and make sure they're sort of, locking that in first. And I think what Minnesota needs to be able to do is, conversely, they need to be able to bring the game to Omaha and sort of get on the board first, because Minnesota and really any college program, when you score first, it's this absurd advantage at the college game, because there's so many games per week. There's so much going on. And if you are able to score first and then the opposing team has to push, you open up that space behind, and all of a sudden you have more room to operate offensively. So it's sort of like an embarrassment of riches anytime you're the first team to score. And so for Minnesota, which is a team that can actually really play to their opponent a lot, like they can get into a grinded out game if the other team is trying to grind it out. Minnesota can't let that be the case, because if you get into a game where it's just like the midfield is back and forth chaos and the final thirds are sort of locked in, even if you're an overmatched team, like it can be a 90-minute or an extra time tie. And so for Minnesota, I think they need to get that combination passing going soon. I think what will be interesting to see is if freshman Lauren Donovan is back starting at holding mid. She had been sick with a non-COVID related illness, and she's played the last 2 games, but not the 90 minutes that she was playing, which is sort of spectacular as a holding mid freshman. And so will she be able to play holding mid, which can release Meg Gray to play the Iowa native, so sandwich between Nebraska and Minnesota, if she can play more in the attack, because she's a really good combination player. And so will they be able to get those players forward, get some early combination? Because the thing is, against Baylor and against Drake and against Wyoming, the games where they've scored within the first 5 minutes. And so which is nuts for them. They never do that. And so if
Omaha that can't happen to Omaha tonight.
And so I think that'll be a big signal, because I think Minnesota should come in wanting to score multiple goals. I think they should want to take the momentum from creating chances but not scoring against Mississippi State, to
Mhm.
scoring 4 goals against Wyoming. If they want to continue their trajectory into Big Ten play, they should want to put up multiple goals. That should be their goal, their aim. But they're really only going to be able to do that, I think, if they score somewhat early in that first half to make sure they open up the run of play for sure.
Yeah, and I think Omaha wants it to be a tough, grinded out game. That's just how they
Right.
play. And like, I they're
Mm.
not always going to be the prettiest team, but
Yep.
but Coach Walters and his staff have put together a really hardworking team that defends well together, and they defend well together at the right time.
Mhm.
And they do have some talent that's like right there on the edge of like they have Omaha native Grace Ostergaard, who's right there. Reagan Zimmers, Omaha native, right there. Like who can be difference makers. Mo Gore, Kansas State transfer, is still needs to get her feet under and get clicking.
Mhm.
But like they have the talent, and they also have more depth. 2 years ago, if you had asked me what this game was going to be like, Minnesota Omaha, I'd be like, it'd probably be pretty solid for the first, third
Right.
of the game, half the game, but then it was hard as you get into the depth. But like Omaha has started to build depth. They have good players coming in
Mhm.
off the bench that they maybe didn't even have, necessarily last spring or
Mhm.
2 years ago. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be an Omaha Maverick
Yeah.
fan. And they're excited to I know they're excited to welcome Minnesota in. They view it as I believe they view it as another chance, like they viewed Nebraska to.
Right.
I mean, if they can add another Big Ten scalp to their record, they'll be fairly happy. And it's cool to have Delaney Stecker. I believe she's healthy.
Yep.
As far as
Yep.
I know. I
She's
know.
been she's been Nebraska native. Delaney Stecker she's the lone returning starter on the back line. She's a captain back there. She's been absolutely instrumental in orchestrating, the back line there. And she's also continued to be dangerous with that big ball over the top with her left foot. And she was our interview guest a couple weeks ago.
I watched. Yeah, it's great. She's amazing. I got to interview her this summer, and she's obviously a great person, great player, but also a great interview, which
Mhm.
you can't say for everybody. So
Yeah, she's great. And Joe, we won't go too long. And I think in my original tweet I said we're kicking off at 6. We're actually kicking off at 7. So people have plenty of time to watch the show. But Joe, thanks so much for being willing to do this. And for those who don't follow your stuff already, it's obviously Nebraska Soccer Talk. But if folks want to follow you stuff, what's the best way for them to do that? Just if they're starting out.
Yeah, the best way to follow our stuff is we're only on Twitter right now. We're working on getting a Facebook page and Instagram, and we also have a podcast. But to follow us on Twitter, it's at Nebraska_talk. We cover all things Nebraska soccer, mostly college, mostly high school and college, a little bit of club, college commitments. Too much for two guys, me and Chase Hutchison. Yeah, we enjoy it. And then if you search Nebraska Soccer Talk on any podcast platforms, we're there too. So I should be coming out with another episode here in the next week to cover all the stuff that's happened over the last 2 weeks.
And just a huge shout out to Nebraska Soccer Talk, because Minnesota, up until 12 days ago, didn't have multiple Division I teams. Nebraska has like 3. They have men's and women's. You're covering both men and women. You're covering multiple levels of the game. And so even last year, when I was still doing stuff at Equal Time by myself, I could barely keep up, let alone when we've added 2 people. So huge credit to you all.
We do our best.
Well,
yeah, and I do want to give a shout out to like the reason that we've been able to do some good college stuff, especially with the University of Nebraska Omaha, is Kayla Peterson, the sports information person at Omaha, has been awesome. She promotes our stuff and works with us really well. And Coach Tim Walters has been very accessible to myself. So that's been nice too. It's always easier when coaches and players and the athletic departments are like really accessible. So
yep, agreed. And agreed, and can't amplify that statement enough. Trenton with the Gophers now does such a great job. He returned. He was an intern with the team a while back and came back to be an assistant director in the department. He's outstanding. The Gopher athletic department is super helpful with us, and so is the staff. So huge thanks to them. Joe, thanks for joining us. Kickoff at 7 p.m. Gophers versus Omaha. It'll stream live. Just go to the Omaha Women's Soccer website, and we'll tweet out the link too. But if you need to find it, It's free and it's streamed there. So
free with broadcasters from the Omaha journalism program, I believe.
nice.
And then if you're in Omaha, which I know there's some people watching this that are going to be in Omaha, admission is free. They'll have concessions there this time. It's a beautiful day down in Omaha, night for soccer. So I won't be there because I have to go train my club team. But make sure I'll watch the game back later. But if make sure to check out them tonight if you're in town.
I love it. Thanks so much for Joe Cleary. I'm Matt Pravratsky. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody.